Moving on to Vellum. Hal Duncan's book is, again, as the lecture has indicated, primarily understood because he's taking characters from other novels and incorporating them into his story. Some might go so far as to say he steals characters and storylines and incorporates them directly into his novel. If you are familiar with some of these other stories and some of these other characters, you start to understand the deeper significance. For instance, the name Carter. You may have noticed that several of the characters have the last name Carter, and that there are many different variants on it. Randolph, Rudolph, Howard, things like this. Randolph Carter is one of H.P. Lovecraft's recurring protagonists, probably his only recurring protagonist. And Duncan is sort of playing on that in the novel. But Howard Carter was one of the discoverers of King Tut's tomb, and was sort of notable for because the curse of King Tut's tomb and the sort of paranoia that revolved around it. So Duncan isn't just drawing from novels to put together his story. He's also drawing from sort of popular culture. The constant retelling of the same story over and over and over again with slight variations is something that's really kind of unique to this novel. While other people, and you might be familiar with some films that do this, such as Vantage Point, which was a thriller from, I believe, 2007, which showed the assassination, or an assassination attempt on the U.S. president from many different people's points of view. What Hal Duncan is doing is retelling the same story with minor modifications over and over and over again. And in doing so, we get a sort of complete view of the situation. What makes what Duncan's doing unique is that each permutation of the story is from a slightly different version of reality. So not only are we getting a more or less complete picture of the story that happened, but all the possible variants of the story that could have happened. The final novel that was one of your choices for this week was Mark Z. Danielewski's House of Leaves, which has been variously called a satire, a fantasy, a thriller, a mystery, and is a really, really difficult book to categorize, primarily because it's actually several different narratives superimposed on one another. One of the more interesting things about this particular book is that there are several codes buried in it at various levels, and that various people have tried to sort of go in and find all of these codes and find all these buried clues to sort of reveal a deeper meaning for the book. Some of you who have gone online may have found some of these codes. But what's interesting is that a lot of times the answers that these codes reveal only provoke deeper questions. If you're particularly interested in this, I think you might want to look into it. What's also interesting about this book is the fact, and again the lecture sort of referenced this, that it was coupled with a lot of sort of real-world kinds of developments. Danielewski's sister, Poe, and her musical success was pretty significant in the popularity of this book. On a final note, one of the things that I find really interesting about House of Leaves is that almost everyone I know that has read it has some kind of weird story associated with it. For my own part, I stumbled across House of Leaves. I periodically go into bookstores and just pick a book more or less at random and take it home and read it. And I acquired House of Leaves in this way, and I went home. It was like 6 o'clock in the evening, and I started reading, and I didn't put it down until 4 o'clock in the morning. The next day I got up and I read it straight through to the end, and I was just fascinated. I was just overawed by this book, and I went back to the bookstore to try to get some more information about the author. And the display that had had the book in it had been taken down, and I couldn't find a copy of the book anywhere in the bookstore. And I went up to the clerk and asked him, does this author have any other books? Is there any information about this author? And the clerk couldn't find either the book or the author in their database. It was like the guy didn't exist. And if you've read the book, you would understand why that's significant. One of my students in the past had a recurring nightmare as a child about a spiral staircase. And after she read the book, she started having the nightmare again. But the best part was that on break from school, she went back to her old high school, which had just had a construction project take place where they had built a hallway between two of the buildings, and smack dab in the middle of the hallway was a spiral staircase, and she started freaking out and had to be escorted from the school. If you read one of the other novels, you won't understand why this is significant, but it is a funny story. At any rate, I hope you enjoyed whichever novel you read, and if you have any further questions, please do not hesitate to contact me. I'll talk to you again next week.